And just keep moving up on the neck, staying within the key, and starting on consecutive scale tones. Let's go over those one more time, a little quicker so you can hear they sound up the tempo. There we go. A few more examples of this. Let's try it. Let's try an exercise that I use a lot for my picking and also for visualizing scales. Starting the A note on the 5th fret of the low E string, and just go straight up in C major or A minor. The shape would be a whole step and a half step, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then do it in octaves. So you start on the A and the D string, and the A and the B string, keeping the same shape every time. On the picking, each section will start out with a downstroke. Down, down, down. Right there, I shifted to the high A on the 17th fret and descend in 6s. So we've done this kind of idea before, but not in octaves. So we'll go an octave lower to the A on the G string, and another octave lower to the A on the A string. Also, those will start with downstrokes. Down, 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 and hit the A there and start over with the ascending part. Up to tempo, that'll sound like this. There's a real good rhythm to it, and pretty terrifying with the range. And plus, you get to move your left hand around a lot and impress all the neighbors. There's a lot more you can do with 3-note per string scales besides major. I've harmonized a lot of different shapes. The first couple are that same kind of idea where you play them in octaves. So all you have to do is memorize the shape of the first 2 strings, and everything else will just be the same shape an octave higher. It makes these real easy to learn. The first one's a blues scale. Normally when you play the blues scale, it's kind of a pentatonic type shape. Which is cool to phrase with, but it's real hard to play up and down incredibly fast. And the 3-note per string one works great for this. So let's give it a try. The shape, fairly big stretch. We've got a minor third between your 1st and 3rd finger on the low E string, and then a whole step higher with your pinky. Then on the A string, get kind of a weird shape. It's a half step in 6th position, so you'd be playing E flat, E, and G. And it gives you that, basically just 1 octave of the blues scale in the key of A. Then I take it up an octave, starting on an A note on the D string, do that exact same shape, which gives you the exact same notes. And same idea, starting on the A note on the B string, gives you the same notes. And you can use a lot of the sequences that we've already played and get a different sound using those different shapes. But it's basically just the same technique, and you have to have your left hand learn something slightly different, but it shouldn't be too hard to translate. The next scale, yet another octave idea. This one's very similar to, almost identical to a natural minor scale, except there's no 6th. It sounds like this. Basically, one thing to notice is that you've got a pretty wide stretch in the A string. And this would be A, B, C. Not too bad, but then you got D, E, and G. No F. The F's the 6th. In A, it's gone. And we'll do the same idea where we take it up in octaves. So try that shape, starting on the A note of the D string, and the A note of the B string. I really like the sound of this one a lot. For my next guitar trick, I'd like to perform an extremely difficult feat of magic involving handcuffs, a straitjacket, a beautiful assistant, and a canvas mailbag that would make Houdini think twice. Let's get right to it. Pretty darn amazing if I do say so myself. Thank you very much. Here's a harmonic minor shape that's harmonized 3 notes per string. Works real well with a lot of these patterns. Let me start from the highest part, because a lot of the licks I do in this are descending oriented. So just with 2 whole steps, and then you have a half step and a whole step kind of a shape. And that gives it that real characteristic harmonic minor sound. You can put your 6 notes up and down pattern into it and it sounds real good. Right there, you've got a fairly big left hand shift, which happens a lot of times in 3 note per string scales, but once you get used to it, the picking, it's worth the picking ease. They're a fairly simple shape, but it's kind of far in position from the top 2 strings. So you might want to work on that shift. You got to move your first finger a whole step up or a whole step down, depending on whether you're ascending or descending. On the lower strings, you got a fairly big stretch, a half step and a minor third, and then just a half step and a whole step at the end. One of my favorites right now. This is sort of an unorthodox way of playing this scale, but has a lot of unique possibilities. Most of the time when guitar players play the chromatic scale, they'll do it 4 notes per string, which is a great way of playing. It's very efficient. You just have 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, going up each time. Basically, when I play chromatic, I use that scale most of the time. But for a strange effect, you can take the chromatic and harmonize it 3 notes per string. Not nearly as efficient, but you can take the 3 note per string phrasing licks, apply it to the scale, and get a lot of neat sounds. The scale would be like this, starting on E. So you have pretty big position shifts every time. But let's say, let's go back to the pattern that went up and down 4 and up 6 and translate it into the chromatic pattern that we just did. So if you translate this pattern into the chromatic shape, it would sound like this. You're going a pretty big left hand skip, but if you get comfortable with that kind of sequence, it really isn't that bad. It's kind of funny to slow tempo, but at a fast tempo, it sounds really funny. Try that again. This is loads of fun. You're gonna annoy your parents forever with that one. You know, there really is a lot you can do with just that little old pick, but you know, in a way, it's kind of limiting when you know that there's a possibility of using not 1, but 3 picks on the end of a drill. There's really nothing like it. Ah, beautiful, beautiful music. Almost as cool as a polka. All right, let's say good morning to our left hand. We're going to do some hammer-ons and pull-offs. The first one is one that really got my left hand going a lot. It's a 5-note sequence, and basically got 1 note on the high E string, A note, 5th fret, and on the B string, we've got 3 notes, G, F, and D. On the D string, with your 3rd finger, play the D note, 7th fret, and then just go back up. So it's 5 notes up and down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and back to your original. One of the good things about this lick is it uses all your fingers. So besides being a cool sounding lick, it's a real good exercise. When we play it up to tempo, you can hear how it sounds. Now, although there are a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs in this, I still am picking. Basically, my rule for hammer-ons and pull-offs is I pick every time I change to a different string. I occasionally may pick a little more than that to get a little more aggressiveness out of it, but as a bare minimum, I always pick when I go to the next string. So for this, basically I pick the first 2 notes because I change strings, then do 2 pull-offs, then pick the next 2 strings, and then hammer on the next 2 notes. So the whole thing is like pick, pick, pull off, pick, pick, hammer, hammer. It's kind of a good sequence to remember. And again, it'll sound like this. There's a lot of variations of that you'll see soon. A thing that you can add to that that'll give it a real good sound is something like this. It's got 3 notes ascending, A, B, C, and then you'll go down as far as the G note on the B string. So the whole thing goes A, B, C, B, A, G. That in itself is a real good pull-off. And in combination with the earlier one, sounds really good. That'll sound like this. That's the one we just did, and then the earlier one together. The next sequence is an exercise I use not only to build my left hand, but it's also a real good sounding phrase. Let's start fairly high up on the 13th fret of the B string on the C note. This will all be in a kind of a whole step shape, a whole step between each finger. It'll be C, D, and D. And the whole idea of this lick, you'll always play those notes on the B string, but the note on the E string alternates. First you'll do an F note with your first finger on the 13th fret, and then descend. Then you do basically the same thing, but instead of playing the F, you'll bar with your 3rd finger and play the G. A lot of people do whole steps with their 2nd finger. If that's the case, that'll work fine, whatever is comfortable. Then use your pinky and bar and get the A note. So each time the notes on the B string are the same, but the note on the E string changes between F, G, and A. And that up to tempo will sound like this. The next pull-off pattern is one of my favorites because it's got more of a 16th note or a 4 feel. With a lot of the 3 note per string patterns, it's real easy to get into a real triplet sound. Where you have triplet, 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 triplet. And that can sound real good. I must admit I love that sound, but anything gets old after a while, so it's nice to get more of a 16th note kind of sound. This particular sequence has the same fingering in a 3 note per string scale, but because of the way it's sequenced, has more of a 16th note or a 4 feel. And here's how it sounds. Let's put it in our old faithful 3 note per string C major scale. And the order of notes will go like this. Basically, you just go up 4 notes again. And then go right to the A note with your pinky. And then go back to the F. And then ascend 3 notes in that scale, which would be F, G, and A. A lot easier just to listen to it. It's slow. Let's do just that. And you can hear how there's 2 sets of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Also works real well for picking. But I've preferred for left hand. There I did that same sequence, just using each set of strings in that C major scale. a lot of times the phrases you can come up with using that sequence are a lot more interesting. For my next guitar trick, I will perform one of the most dangerous and difficult guitar tricks you can do. I will take the guitar, I will place it into the box of terror. I will then put on my safety goggles, which my beautiful assistant Lisa will get for me. Thank you so much. Then put on my rubber safety gloves. Rubber safety glove number 2. I will now attempt to saw through the box of terror, leaving the guitar without a scratch. Chainsaw, please. Now to check if the trick worked, abracadabra. And now it will remain without a scratch. For a long time, I didn't even know what arpeggios were. I remember looking up the word in the dictionary and it said notes of a chord played separately, and it just didn't hit in there. Finally, when I moved to California, I saw a lot of players doing actual arpeggios, and it really inspired me to work on it. One of the exercises that I really recommend is taking a smaller sequence for sweep picking and working on that, as opposed to all 6 strings, because if you're not used to sweep picking, it's really a pretty difficult technique, and a lot of times even if you are used to it, it's still difficult. So try taking a small chunk at first and working on that. Here's a real good one. It's part of a C major triad sweep. It's basically just got 4 notes. It'll be 2 notes on the high E string, G and D, C on the B string, 13th fret with your 2nd finger, and your 1st finger on the 12th fret of the G string, G note. So just 4 notes, and just descend over and over again. Now the tricky part is the picking of it, which will be a downstroke and 3 upstrokes, and that 3 upstrokes is the sweep. That'll sound like this. The important thing is to get it even in tempo. You don't want to rush the 3 upstrokes, even though they're probably going to be a lot easier to do. You may tend to do this initially to make them faster than the other part. But what you really want to do is get a solid 4 feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Another variation you can do with that sequence that has really helped my economy picking a lot is adding 2 notes in the beginning. The 2 notes are G and F, and then doing that 4-note sequence that we just did. So it'll sound like this. Kind of gives it a pedal tone feel. Has a kind of sort of a classical sound to it. You can go even further and add a couple notes in the D string. Let's try adding E and D. And that'll sound like this when added on to that previous lick. So for the picking for that, you can see you've got a lot of upstrokes and downstrokes in a row. Let me run through the picking real quick so you can get the hang of it. It'll be down, up, down, up, 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 down, up, down, 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 up. The cool thing about that is it has a definite rhythm to it, where a lot of times when you're initially doing sweep picking, it's easy to forget the rhythm. Let me show you some examples of applying that sequence to actual music. One thing I've been working on a lot lately is sequencing arpeggios, basically playing them in some way besides straight up and down, just blah, 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 blah. An example of some techniques that work really well for that, I'm fingering them a little more two-note per string oriented, almost like a pentatonic scale, but fingering the notes in a way where it sounds like an arpeggio. In fact, it is an arpeggio. Let's start off on the high E string. It'll be G and D. There's two notes. Then go right down to the G string, B and G, and then with your second finger on the D string, hit the E note. So right there you have all the notes out of an E minor triad. And I just go up and down using hammer-ons and pull-offs. Another thing, it's real easy to get a real good tone with distortion using this kind of technique. It's also very easy to sequence it. You could maybe go down 3 notes and then go back up and then back down. So you can do the notes in a lot of different orders, so it's not just straight up and down. You do a sequence like this. Let me take that slow for you one time. So I do go straight down the first time, back up as far as the E, and then back down to the G, then to the octave G, down 3 notes, and down another 3 notes starting on E. Probably much easier just to hear it slow. Let's try it again. And then over and over. One way of playing arpeggios that I've had a lot of success with is string skipping. Basically what this is playing some notes on one string, like say the G string, and completely skipping the adjacent string, which would be the B, and going right to the E. This is a real good way of getting arpeggios by using hammer-ons and pull-offs. The first one that I did, which I really like the sound of and still use a lot, is an E minor 7th. The notes, you have a pretty big stretch in the G string. It'd be D, E, and G. Then you don't use the B string at all. You can cut it off with a chainsaw or whatever. On the E string, you'll play B, D, and D. You'll notice that your first finger and pinky are on the same frets the whole time. The fingers that have to change is you'll use your second finger on the G string and your third finger on the E string. A lot of times I'll add a lower note with my third finger on the G note, 10th fret of the A string. You can use sequences that you used in your hammer-on pull-off licks within these. They translate real well. Also, two-handed stuff works real well in combination with this. For example, try adding on a G note. Or maybe sliding up to the B note. Sliding may take a while to get used to, but after you wear those initial grooves in your first finger, it'll sound real cool. Well, in order to play the hip licks, you need the hip tones, and here's where they come from. I've got pretty much one of my favorite things of all time, the new 88 MP1. The real cool thing about it is that not only does it sound great, but you get some incredible switching with it. By pressing one button, you can change everything that's MIDI plus kick-in stuff in the effects loop. Give me an example. I get my normal distortion tone.